The United States produces more oil than any nation on Earth. There's just one problem. American refineries can't use it. 70% of American refining capacity was built to process heavy crude. American oil is light. Reconfiguring a single facility takes 4 years and costs billions. There is no quick fix, and America's infrastructure, its military, its entire war-fighting arsenal depends on heavy crude it cannot produce. This is America's Achilles heel, not Russia's, not China's. Neither country's refineries depend on heavy crude the way America's do, but both saw the vulnerability and built an alliance around it. Venezuela. 300 billion barrels, the largest reserves on Earth. Extra heavy crude. At room temperature, it moves like sludge. It can't reach a tanker without chemicals to thin it first. Russia supplies those chemicals. Without them, Venezuelan oil doesn't move. China buys the oil. 600,000 barrels a day. Keeps the regime solvent. Russia enables. China purchases. Together, they control an American dependency. 1,600 miles from Florida. In November 2025, Moscow offered Caracas the Oreshnik hypersonic missile, Mach 10, capable of reaching Miami in under 10 minutes. The last time Russia tried to place missiles in this hemisphere, the world nearly ended. That was Cuba. 60 years ago, this is Venezuela. And it's happening now. September 2nd, 2025. A speedboat off the Venezuelan coast. 11 dead. Trump posted the video himself. A small craft. A flash of light. Then fire. By December, 22 strikes. 87 killed. Caribbean. Eastern Pacific. No survivors from most vessels. No public evidence. No congressional vote. If you are a narco-terrorist smuggling drugs in our hemisphere, Defense Secretary Hegseth announced, we will treat you like we treat Al-Qaeda. Day or night, we will hunt you down and kill you. The build-up had started weeks earlier. Quietly. First the warships, Stockdale, Gravely, Lake Erie. A surge into Southern Command waters. Then the amphibious assault ships, Iwo Jima, Fort Lauderdale, San Antonio, carrying 2,200 Marines of the 22nd Expeditionary Unit. Then the submarines. The F-35s redeployed to Puerto Rico. The reopening of Roosevelt Roads. A naval station shuttered for 20 years. And then the Ford arrived. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest warship ever built. 4,000 sailors, 75 aircraft, a floating airfield, pulled from the Mediterranean and repositioned 500 miles north of Caracas. 15% of the deployed US Navy, concentrated in one theatre. On December 10th, they seized the oil. The skipper, 1.8 million barrels of Venezuelan crude, bound for Cuba, then China. Helicopters launched from the Ford, Coast Guard, Marines, Special Forces rappelling onto the deck. Trump called it the largest tanker seizure ever. We keep it, I guess, was his response when asked by reporters. Venezuela called it piracy. It's the largest build-up of American military might in the Caribbean since the Cold War. The showdown didn't start this week, and it isn't about drugs, it's about oil. 6 days later, the president posted to Truth Social. Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. Then came the demand. Until such time as they return to the United States of America, all of the oil, land, and other assets that they previously stole from us. Stolen assets, stolen oil fields. He wasn't talking about drugs anymore. In 2007, Hugo Chavez nationalized Venezuela's oil industry. ExxonMobil. ConocoPhillips. Billions in American corporate assets, transferred to the state. International arbitration awarded the companies nearly $20 billion. Venezuela never paid. 18 years later, the United States is blockading the Caribbean to collect. I'm ordering a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going into and out of Venezuela, announced Trump. 5 weeks earlier, his chief of staff had told Vanity Fair what the strikes were really about. The president, she said, wants to keep on blowing boats up until Maduro cries uncle. On December 17th, Texas Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro characterized the move as unquestionably an act of war. A war that Congress never authorized, and the American people do not want. The mask is off. This isn't counter-narcotics. This isn't national security. This is collection. 6 days before the White House proved him right, Senator Van Hollen said what no one in the administration would. This shows their whole cover story about interdicting drugs is a big lie. This is really about regime change by force. But the data had been clear for months. In March, the State Department's own report identified Mexico as, quote, the only significant source of illicit fentanyl affecting the United States. The supply chain is well documented. Precursor chemicals from China and India. Cartel laboratories in Mexico. Distribution networks into American cities. Venezuela doesn't appear on the map. Venezuela's role in the drug trade is transit. Roughly 10% of US-bound cocaine passes through Venezuelan waters. Not production. Not fentanyl. Transit. So why the aircraft carrier? Why the strikes? Why the seizure? It's economic warfare, and BRICS is fracturing under the pressure. At the Kazan summit, Brazil vetoed Venezuela's entry. Caracas called it a stab in the back. Brazil's foreign policy advisor was blunt. Maduro had promised evidence of his election victory. He never delivered. Confidence, he said, was broken. India is pivoting. Russian oil went from 2% of Indian imports in 2021 to 50% today. Trump imposed tariffs. India's response: they'll reduce Russian purchases if America lets them buy from Iran and Venezuela instead. The US sanctions regime is leaking. Shadow fleets, ship-to-ship transfers, falsified transponders. Russian oil flows to India, gets refined, ships to Europe labelled as Indian product. A loophole the West refuses to close, because closing it would mean admitting their architecture doesn't work. China remains the lifeline. 600,000 barrels a day, but the noose is tightening. The asymmetry is brutal. America can print money, absorb tariff shocks, reposition carrier groups overnight. Venezuela cannot. Its economy runs on one product, one customer, one lifeline. And now, there's a carrier group between Caracas and its only customer. Find the Strait of Malacca on a map. 600 miles of water between Indonesia and Malaysia. At its narrowest, less than 2 miles wide. China burns 16 million barrels of oil a day. It pumps 4 million. The gap, 12 million barrels, comes by sea, and 80% of it passes through this strait. Every barrel from Saudi Arabia, from Iraq, from the UAE, all of it funnels through Malacca, the most trade-dependent nation on Earth, betting its economy on a 2-mile gap. The US Navy has run the math. In a war over Taiwan, you don't need to sink the Chinese fleet. You park submarines at the Chokepoint. You wait. And you watch 12 million barrels a day stop flowing. Overland pipelines, Russia, Kazakhstan, Myanmar, carry less than 4 million. Not enough. Not close. That's not a supply chain. That's a noose with American fingers on the knot. Beijing has spent 2 decades and $1 trillion trying to escape it. Belt and road. Ports in Pakistan. Pipelines through Myanmar. Rail lines across Central Asia. All of it meant to bypass the water. None of it works. The ports are unfinished. The pipelines are vulnerable. The math never closes. And underneath it all, a clock is ticking. China is dying. Not economically. Not politically. Literally. The population declines each year. Replacement requires 2.1 children per woman. China is at 1.0, the lowest birth rate on Earth. By 2050, 40% of the country will be over 60. 10% under 15. 200 million people gone by mid-century. The population halved by 2100. A pension system with no one to fund it. A manufacturing base with no one to run it. A military with no one to fill it. This is why Venezuela matters. 600,000 barrels a day that never touch Malacca. Direct from the Caribbean, beyond the reach of any Pacific blockade. In a war over Taiwan, that oil isn't a trade relationship. It's China's oxygen. Russia supplies the chemicals that make it flow. China buys every barrel Caracas can pump. The triangle holds because each side needs the other two. And now, there's a carrier strike group parked on top of it. America isn't blockading drugs. It's blockading Beijing's last breath. This isn't just a blockade. It's the fulcrum. On one side, the architecture that has governed global energy for 80 years. The dollar, the tanker routes, the refineries built to American specifications, the alliances that enforce it. On the other, BRICS. An alternative to the dollar. An alternative to the sanctions. An alternative to the choke points America controls. Venezuela is crucial to both. 300 billion barrels, the largest reserves on Earth. Extra heavy crude that only specialized refineries can process. America has those refineries. 70% of US refining capacity was built for heavy crude, Venezuelan, Mexican, and Canadian crude. Not the light shale oil America produces. Lose Venezuela, and American refineries lose 30% of their supply. Or they don't run at all. China can't walk away either. 80% of Chinese oil transits the Strait of Malacca, a 2-mile gap the US Navy can close in hours. In a war over Taiwan, that's not a supply chain. It's a hostage. Venezuelan oil bypasses Malacca entirely, direct from the Caribbean, beyond the reach of any blockade. 600,000 barrels a day. Their lifeline in a potential Taiwan invasion. Russia supplies the chemicals that make it flow. Without Russia, Venezuelan crude moves like tar. Moscow doesn't just support Caracas, it enables every barrel that reaches Beijing. 3 powers, 1 oil supply, each dependent on the other. Now there's an American carrier group sitting on top of it. 62 years ago, Russian missiles in Cuba brought the world to the brink. 13 days, secret channels, a blockade. Then, withdrawal. November 2025, Russia offered Venezuela the Oreshnik, a hypersonic missile. Mach 10, Miami in 10 minutes. The offer is still on the table. The carrier is still on station. The largest naval force in the Caribbean since the Cold War. And no one is talking about drugs anymore. Last time the world stepped back. This time? Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more content like this.